University's president, Elizabeth Davis.
Good evening and welcome to the third and final night of the Riley Institute's and Ollie's at Furman's StraightTalk series, Politics in the Divided States of America. Thank you for being here tonight as we move from examining the influence of America's culture on public perception and policy and exploring what it may take to reduce partisan animosity and seek common ground. Today is Constitution Day, a commemoration of the signing of the U.S. Constitution on September 17, 1787, 237 years ago. The first and foremost purpose of the Constitution is to form a more perfect union as we, the people, not me, not you, but we, the people. Today, when we read the headlines or watch our news feeds, it's hard to catch a glimpse of we the people, isn't it? In our pick sides political culture, we're expected to retreat into echo chambers and camps of people who see eye to eye with us on every issue. But we know that progress happens when we lean into the risky and sometimes uncomfortable practice of listening to and sharing ideas with those who hold different perspectives from our own. A study done by More in Common and the Constructive Dialogue Institute found that 94% of college students from across political ideologies agree that we should listen to others with an open mind, including those with whom we disagree. We asked a similar question to Furman students, and here's what the responses looked like. It brings me great hope to see that our future lies in the hands of emerging young leaders who are willing to step out of their comfort zones to practice dialogue across differences. This series serves as an example of Furman's On Discourse initiative. On Discourse amplifies efforts across campus to equip our students and wider community to reflect on the influences that shape our values and beliefs, encounter alternative ideas and experiences beyond our own, and engage in listening and dialogue across difference. I acknowledge that this work is anything but easy, but principled leadership rarely is. Tonight, we are honored to be joined by the Riley Institute's namesake, Furman alumnus, two-term governor of South Carolina, and former U.S. Secretary of Education, Dick Riley. Secretary Riley, thank you for the legacy of bipartisan, collaborative leadership for the sake of the common good that you exemplify for our community, state, and nation. Tonight, we're joined by leaders who represent both liberal and conservative viewpoints. We'll begin with keynote remarks from former U.S. Congresswoman Val Demings, who will reflect on the value of cross-partisan work and what's at stake when we fail to practice it. Following her remarks, Furman Professor of Politics and International Affairs, Danielle Vinson, will moderate a conversation between the executive directors of two presidential centers, David Kramer of the George W. Bush Institute and Stephanie Streett of the Clinton Foundation. They will discuss what can be done to turn down the temperature on political animosity and us versus them rhetoric. Towards the end of our program, leaders from student organizations will have the opportunity to ask questions. Together, we'll take a look at what it will take for us to participate in this tricky, messy, courageous practice of engaging in discourse across difference for the sake of we the people. To begin, I'm honored to introduce our keynote speaker, Representative Val Demings. I got lots more to say. Representative Demings served Florida's 10th Congressional District from 2017 to 2023 and was considered among several leaders as a potential running mate to President Biden in 2020 for her strong leadership. During her time in Congress, Representative Demings served on the committees on Judiciary, Intelligence, Homeland Security, and Oversight and Government Reform. Prior to her time in Congress, Representative Demings was the first female police chief of the Orlando Police Department. She currently serves as an executive fellow with the Bipartisan Policy Center, an organization that ensures policymakers work across party lines to craft bipartisan solutions. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Congresswoman Val Demings. Thank you for being here. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity, do ordain and establish the Constitution of the United States of America. These words are familiar to all of us. They are the introduction to the most important document of our nation. They define what we do, which leads us to who we are and why it all matters. Dr. Davis, I want to thank you so much for that introduction and for inviting me to your beautiful campus. Let's give your president a round of applause. I'm honored to be here at Furman University to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Raleigh Institute and to celebrate the man behind it all, Secretary Richard Dick Raleigh. Let's give him another round of applause. You know, it's interesting to go back and look at previous topics for the Straight Talk series. 2015, it was crime and punishment. 2016, education for life, working together to fulfill the promise of education. 2017, media and politics in a post-truth era. 2018, who gets to be an American? Do we see where we're going in our precious nation? 2019, nationalist fervor on the rise in the US and Europe. 2020, voting in America. I was in the Capitol on January 6th. 2021, structural racism. 2022, a new climate movement. 2023, our fragile democracy. And tonight, here I am in 2024 for politics, not in a united nation, but in the divided states of America. In this moment, this divided states of America. My task tonight is to try to answer the question, how do we start talking to each other again? Well, I do believe that the preamble of the Constitution makes it clear that America's faith is and has always been in the hands of the people. The founders did not put America's fate in the hands of kings or queens, presidents, or any other elected official. America's greatness was entrusted to the will of the people. When America fought for its independence, we declared that we would never again bow down to the will of a king. Our nation, it matters. America matters. Our democracy, it matters. Through each war, each battle, every drop of bloodshed, each movement, whether women's rights, civil rights, voting rights, rights of equality, many battles, you know we won. But the war against the forces, both foreign and domestic, that worked overtime to divide us, to undermine who we were created to be, that war never ends. I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida. I am the youngest of 7 children. As we think about our nation, I stand here tonight as the daughter of a maid and a janitor, the daughter of parents who worked hard every day to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. You see, my parents were poor, Black, and grew up in the South. And as I look back, they had so much that they could have legitimately complained about, felt hopeless about, felt separated from the nation that they call home. But you know what? I never heard them complain or speak ill of any group of people. You see, they just worked hard and taught their 7 children to be decent and honest and play by the rules. And you know what? My parents voted religiously. I used to think that not voting surely was against the law because my parents, they never failed to do it. I can remember sometimes our family car wasn't running. My parents would pay someone to drive them to the polls, to cast their vote. The hardworking, God-fearing maid and janitor. I gotta tell you, I didn't understand it growing up. But in looking back, I get it. My parents saw voting as a right that people were willing to suffer, bleed, and die for. And my parents were determined to do what they could do to make our nation, to make America greater. And even if they did not always reap the benefits of their labor, they voted for a better America for their children, their grandchildren, and for future generations. They were good Americans, and they believed in America's promise. Their steadfastness inspired me to dedicate my life to public service. I spent 27 years at the Orlando Police Department, and when I think about it, when I think about the partisanship that we see today, I cannot tell you the political party of the overwhelming majority of men and women that I worked with at the department. You see, we had a job to do, we had a mission to accomplish, and we were laser focused on accomplishing that mission. Doesn't our preamble, the Constitution to the United States, the Constitution of the United States, clearly define our mission? And are we laser focused on accomplishing that mission? At the police department, we came from different places and different races. We practiced different religions and were parts of different political parties. But we did not focus on our differences. We focused on our mission. And that mission was to keep Orlando a safe city. And in order to do that, we had to bring people together to solve Orlando's problems. In 2017, I was honored to be sworn into the House of Representatives. And I took that same spirit and attitude with me. We're not going to focus on our differences. We're going to focus on our mission. But I have to say, I was disappointed oftentimes with some who were there who were not interested really in solving America's problems, facing and dealing and addressing with America's challenges. Instead, with such an amazing opportunity to serve our nation in such a special way, they were there to entertain, to blow up the institution, to disrupt any sense of normalcy, to score political points, and it appeared the only thing that mattered was winning the next election by any means necessary. Then there were those, many of those, the majority, who wanted to do the right thing, but the environment for them was just too much to deal with. I remember one day we had a vote on the floor, and it seemed to me that voting in favor of the legislation was pretty simple unless you were putting party over country. And one of my Republican friends and classmates voted against the legislation, and I was simply shocked because I knew he was a good person. So after the vote, I marched to his office and closed his door and asked, "What happened?" And I told him that I could not believe that he did not vote for the legislation to help the people that he represented. And he shook his head and said, "Val, I have never seen anything like this before." These people, his words, not mine, come to my house and harass my family, my wife, and my children. Now, his solution was to leave Congress, and many others left because the environment was just too much for them to take. But ladies and gentlemen, we need good people on both sides of the aisle to stay and to serve. What threatens our democracy? Yes, a toxic partisan division environment certainly threatens our democracy, undermining our system of checks and balances and eroding our trust in our institutions. Clearly threatens our democracy. Those who promote or accept or spread misinformation, that threatens our democracy. I serve as an executive fellow at the Bipartisan Center in Washington, D.C., and this is their mission. They say by bringing together Republicans and Democrats and providing them with the space, policy insights, and evidence-based research they need to negotiate in good faith, we can turn legislators' best ideas into passable, durable laws. You see, the American people depend on their leaders to lead by example. They depend on their leaders to set the tone. They depend on their leaders to lower the temperature and work to improve their safety and overall well-being. Remember, promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity. One of my former colleagues in the House that I love to quote, I think his name will be familiar to you, is Congressman Jim Clyburn from South Carolina. I know that name is familiar to you. Jim says this: we don't need to make America great again. America is great. America has always been great. That is not our challenge. But Jim goes on to say, but the challenge is, it seems to me, how do we make the greatness of America accessible and affordable for all Americans? If America is great and good, then every American, shouldn't they have access to the greatness and goodness of America? Isn't that the American way as we think about today and celebrate Constitution Day? So tonight, students, how do we make that a reality? A good friend of mine used to say, well, everybody counts, accessible to the goodness of America, but guess what? Everybody, every person in this room, every person all over our nation is accountable. Which means that we all have a role to play. We all should have access to America's greatness, an opportunity to that greatness. But we all have an obligation to contribute to America's greatness in order to form a more perfect union? Do we still believe and root for the American team with that good old American spirit? Yes, I know we're facing some challenges. I served in the House of Representatives, but are we still rooting hard for America and the American team? Do we still believe in America and the promise of America? Do we still honor the American dream? You see, we need leaders who unite us through their words and through their actions. How do we start talking to each other again? By learning to start listening to each other again, and not to be threatened by the other person's values and views, or where they come from, or what they believe in, or who they worship, but to come together to solve some of America's greatest problems. See, by seeing the other person in the same way that we want to be seen, individuals with some good and some flaws, but individuals who just want to have a chance to make it. We must learn to lead with what unites us and not with what divides us. You see, America is great, but the founders told us America is not perfect. But ladies and gentlemen, with our students, with all of you, we can form a more perfect union if we have the political will and love America enough to do so. God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman Demings, for your very thoughtful and powerful message to us. Before I send you all out to charge the doors and follow what she said to do, we want to have a conversation up here. Congresswoman Demings will join us back a little bit later to take some questions from our student group leaders. But first, we want to consider tonight's topic with the executive directors of two leading institutions that are concerned about the need to unite our nation. Now serving as Executive Director of the George W. Bush Institute, David Kramer previously worked in Washington, D.C. for 24 years, including serving in the U.S. Department of State during the George W. Bush administration as Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, and as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs. Also joining the discussion is Stephanie Streett, the Executive Director of the Clinton Foundation. She served in the Clinton administration for 8 years on the White House staff, ultimately as assistant to the president and director of scheduling. Previously, she worked on Capitol Hill as a staff member for the United States Senate's Budget Committee. David and Stephanie, thank you both for coming together for this conversation. For students, Clinton was a Democrat, Bush was a Republican, so we've got different parties up here. That's important for this conversation. I want to start by giving you each a minute or two to respond to what Congresswoman Demings had to say. David, we'll start with you.
Danielle, thank you very much. Well, first, if I can, President Davis, thank you very much. And Secretary Riley and Betty, happy birthday to you. Let me just say, Julie, thank you for inviting us here, you and your terrific team for putting this event together. The three of us have had an opportunity to meet with some of the students here. Libby gave Val and me a ride in from the airport. We met with Addison and Alice and Elavina, I believe. Forgive me if I misspoke your name. And I think the three of us came away just incredibly inspired by what we heard from just four of you. And something tells me they are representative of the student body here. Mm-hmm. And it's a cliche to say that the younger generation is the future of this country. It also happens to be true. And as we all get older up here, we are going to rely on you to help try to restore a sense of civility and the ability to talk with each other. I think Representative Demings gave a pretty tough act to follow. And I want to salute her for what she said and appreciate very much what she said. And we'll have an opportunity, I think, to dive more deeply into this. But thank you again for inviting the three of us, but including me in this. It's a real honor to be here.
Stephanie, did you want to offer any reflections?
Absolutely, thank you. And I too want to give a special shout out and a special thanks to Secretary Riley, who I had the great honor and privilege of working with during the Clinton campaign and during the Clinton administration, and Betty as well. I'd love to say happy birthday to you, President Davis. It's been an astounding day, and as David said, really remarkable, inspirational. And the students here are just top-notch, so impressive. And Julie, as I said earlier, the way she runs the program and the staff at the Institute is phenomenal. It rivals, I was the director of scheduling at the White House, and the scheduling advance teams, you know, they're the people that prepare and do all the logistics for all of the events for the president. Julie and her team rivals anything that I saw at the White House, so big thanks to you. Well, I'm always inspired by Representative Demings, and what really touched me was her life story. First and foremost, hearing about her being the youngest of such a big family and about her parents and how they modeled good citizenship and what it meant to be a citizen of these United States. What a powerful role model for Val and for her siblings. And clearly that had a great impression on her. And she carried that with her to her career in the police department, thinking about how she solved problems there and listening to her, what her goals were, that staying focused on the mission and bringing people together to get to solutions, and then taking that same ethos, that same spirit and mission to Congress. And she stuck it out. She was there, did some incredible things, and worked across the aisle. And now being at the Bipartisan Policy Institute, obviously bringing those same values that shaped her parents' life, that shaped her childhood and her career in public service to that important work she's doing in D.C. So I think we need to all, what I took from that is listening to her tell her story, is how could we all do a better job listening to and understanding people's stories who we may disagree with. Instead of making assumptions and always, jumping to conclusions, it seems to me that we need to do a little bit more reflection today, listening to people's stories, which inform potentially their opinions about things. And so by stepping back a little bit and maybe not saying as much and maybe doing a better job listening, hopefully that will start us on the right path to being able to find common ground.
All right, David, I want to dive in here. You recently championed a joint bipartisan statement signed by 13 presidential centers, including not just the Bush Institute and the Clinton Foundation, but also those connected to the legacies of Hoover, Roosevelt, Truman, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush Sr., and Obama. It's a lot of presidents.
A lot.
What could have united all of those varied groups? It was a collective commitment to the democratic values on which the United States was founded, and I want to read a brief excerpt from that. We, the undersigned, represent a wide range of views across a breadth of issues. We recognize that these views can exist peaceably, side by side, when rooted in the principles of democracy. Debate and disagreement are central features in a healthy democracy. Civility and respect in political discourse, whether in an election year or otherwise, are essential. Americans have a strong interest in supporting democratic movements and respect for human rights around the world because free societies elsewhere contribute to our own security and prosperity here at home. But that interest is undermined when others see our own house in disarray. The world will not wait for us to address our problems, so we must continue to strive toward a more perfect union. This statement emphasizes the importance of collaboration and dialogue across differences and the willingness to value democracy over party for the sake of getting things done. You've been charged with leading cross-partisan work throughout your career in politics, and especially through your time with the Bush administration and now with the Institute. That seems harder today than before. Why or how has cross-partisanship become more difficult, and why did 13 presidential senators decide to publish that joint statement now?
The letter came about actually going back to 2022, but we hadn't approached the other presidential centers with it. We felt that that year wasn't the right year. We were heading into midterm elections, but we decided to dust it off and give it a shot in 2023, a non-election year in most of the country. And the reception we got was very quick and very positive, including we're grateful to Stephanie and the Clinton Foundation, but also 11 other foundations across the political parties. We felt that it was important to reaffirm democratic principles, our values as a nation, our founding, as Val was describing in her opening remarks, how we have progressed as a country. We were founded with the sin of slavery. We denied women the right to vote. And yet, over the course of our time, through some very difficult periods, we have tried to correct our mistakes, including those two. And we wanted to remind people that we actually have more in common, but it is also very important for us to be able to disagree with each other, to have vibrant but respectful debate. And that makes our democracy, that makes our country stronger. And so by bringing all of these presidential centers together, we issued what we thought was a pretty basic statement, but I think it's fair to say the reaction we got to it was thank you from 99% of the reaction. And I think we were heartened by that. It seemed to resonate with people that there are a lot of people out there who don't fall into one extreme or the other, but are in what sometimes is called the silent majority, and they want to hear from centers like ours to say it's actually okay to have concerns about where we're going, but to disagree on issues and have a healthy debate, but to remember that we have much more in common than we do, as Val was saying in her remarks, than what divides us. And so I'll just end quickly with this. I mentioned this walking over from dinner. There was a former Congressman, Jim Colby from Arizona, a Republican from Arizona, with whom I became very good friends. And after he left Congress, he joined the German Marshall Fund, where I was working for a little while, and he gave a talk to a small group of us. He cited three things. This is now reflecting on the Congress before Representative Demings was there. He said three things are really a problem when it comes to our politics in the Congress. One is gerrymandering, which creates districts that play to the extremes instead of toward the center. Two is cable TV. Back then, this is over a dozen years ago, where the way to get booked on these programs was to scream at each other and call each other names and question each other's patriotism. And then third was fundraising, because it meant that members of Congress were too busy raising money rather than spending time getting to know each other in Washington. And it's that last point that I just want to end with, which is it is hard to question somebody's patriotism. It is hard to call someone a jerk. It is hard to really belittle them and degrade them if you get to know them, if you sit down and talk with them. And it's that personal interaction that is so important, and our centers are doing things together that try to address these challenges.
Excellent. Stephanie, There's a lot of emphasis these days on polarization and the intensity of polarization. But as David pointed out, and as a foundational study by More in Common found, 67% of Americans are part of what has become defined as the exhausted majority. People who are fatigued by our polarization and eager for change, even on issues that have become highly polarized and hot-button topics. Drawing from your experiences through your career in the Clinton administration and now with the foundation, what drives polarization? Why is it so intense? But most importantly, are there places within our institutions in government or society where we can see evidence of people coming together across those differences to identify those common goals and solutions?
Well, thank you for that great two-part question, and I'm going to start with the first part of your question, how did we get here? And I think there are many, many reasons of how we've gotten to where we are today, but I'm going to sort of pick up on a point that David was making from early in my career, actually my first job out of college, working on Capitol Hill for the Senate Budget Committee. Senator Jim Sasser from Tennessee was the chair of the committee, the majority staff that I worked on, and then Pete Domenici from New Mexico was the minority chair. Well, I have to tell you that things weren't perfect back then, but even though I was employed by the majority staff, I served both staffs. I worked, I was a very low level, it was my first job. I was the staff assistant to everybody there. So I didn't only return messages or only get coffee, at that point you did those things, for the majority staff. I saw everybody on equal footing, because that's what you were supposed to do. I didn't only hang out with the staff and people my age that worked for Democrats or on the majority staff. We hung out with the minority staff, and we hung out with other young people and interns from all over Capitol Hill. And in turn, and you mentioned this, connection is so important. In those days, members of Congress, members of the House and Senate, they lived with their families in Washington, D.C. They didn't have to go home every weekend to fundraise. And so people's families grew up together. People were connected outside the workplace. They may argue a really difficult bill on the floor, but then they would go watch their kids' soccer game together. And that was normal. That was very normal. My senior senator from Arkansas, or actually was the junior senator then, Senator David Pryor, his best friend was Arlen Specter, a very conservative Republican. But again, things weren't perfect then, but it definitely, you felt things were a little bit more civil. And because of the connections and the relationships that they developed outside the workplace, I feel like it was easier to get things done. So that's just one part of how I think we've become so polarized, is because members now don't live there, they go home and fundraise pretty much every weekend. So what gives me hope? Where do I see things? Well, you know, typically in times of crisis, our country, Americans come together. I remember in the Clinton administration, the Oklahoma City bombing was just devastating, as you remember, Secretary Riley. It was shocking that that kind of domestic terrorism took place in our country. But President Clinton worked very closely with Governor Frank Keating. As soon as that happened, all the resources of the federal government were marshaled. And it wasn't like because the governor was a Republican, we were going to sort of nickel and dime, or, you know, it was everybody. We're all in this together. And our country came together, our government came together, the FBI, all of the branches, all of the institutions came together to figure out how to deal with this crisis. And Americans came together. It wasn't seen as a Democrat or a Republican idea. When President Bush was president and we had 9/11, he was such an incredible leader, how he stepped up and was the president for all Americans, not just the Republicans. When he stepped out and went to a mosque and had the example of going when everybody was fearful of their neighbor, and especially our Muslim American friends, him taking that step and modeling that compassion and that behavior sent a strong signal. So I do think it is possible to come together and beyond, you know, moments of crises. And I'll give one last example, which is a little bit more recent. Obviously, COVID had a detrimental effect on our economy, on our country. And yes, it was very divided. There was some rhetoric out there. But right in Little Rock, when COVID happened, the day that all the schools closed, our mayor called together some of the leaders of the foundation, of the school foundations, city government, the school district, the Central Arkansas Library System. We all came together for an emergency meeting, and we checked all partisanship at the door. This was an American issue. We had to figure out, the issue was all of these children in the Little Rock School District on free and reduced lunch, how are they going to get their meals? Sometimes that lunch was the only meal they had. So by working together across differences, across party lines, across sectors, the Clinton Foundation, World Central Kitchen, all of the institutions I just mentioned, and a huge core of volunteers came together. And at the Clinton Center, we used the Clinton Center, because we were closed for over a year, as the ground zero for a huge feeding operation, where all of my staff that worked in the restaurant and all of our staff and hundreds of volunteers, we came together and prepared, packaged, and delivered over 1 million meals that year. And when we were delivering those meals, we didn't ask families or kids, are you a Republican or a Democrat? We met them where they were. They were Americans, and we were Americans helping Americans. And I think it is possible to get back to that today if we check our silos and we all realize that we are Americans and America has to come first.
Stephanie mentions relationships and the importance of relationships. We've kind of sorted ourselves into this political tribes that don't really have contact across differences. But researchers have found that we might have something to learn from a surprising source. And before I turn things over to our student questions, I wanted to make sure you see this surprising source, a Heineken beer commercial. So, I'll let them show the clip.
I would describe my political views as the new right.
I say that I'm left.
Feminism today is man-hating.
I would describe myself as a feminist, 100%. Describe what it is like to be you in 5 adjectives.
Okay, frustrating.
Dedicated.
Opinionated.
Lucky. Name 3 things you and I have in common.
We're both male, we're both confident, and we're both loudly spoken.
We know each other better than people who've known each other for 10 minutes should.
Here you are.
Each take a bottle and place it on its corresponding markings on the bar.
Attention, please now stand to watch a short film.
So transgender, it is very odd. We're not set up to understand or see things like that.
I am transgender.
You now have a choice. You may go, or you can stay and discuss your differences over a beer.
I'm only joking.
You had me for a second then.
Well, I'm having a drink.
I'm having a drink.
Yeah.
I would discuss.
Beer.
Yeah, beer and discuss.
As our students and Representative Demings return to the stage, I just want to let you know that through this ad, Stanford University's Polarization and Social Change Lab made note that having contact across partisan divides or even watching others have contact across partisan divides can help ratchet down the partisan animosity. So please keep that in mind as you continue to watch the conversation across partisan divides. Welcome Congresswoman Demings back, and I have the names. I have not put them in order. So these are students from various organizations on campus. We have asked them to come up with questions that would be relevant to tonight's topic. So as I call their name, they will come up and tell you their question, and we will let our panel begin to answer that question. And I'm so glad I asked how to pronounce your name. Alexandra Val Demings, Religious Council.
And this question is for any speaker to answer. Sadly, religion has become divided over time in some parts of society, where judgment of others has increased, and even making some feel unsafe. How can we be sure political leaders will provide freedom of speech and expression while protecting those who are being oppressed for their religious views?
Who wants
I'll
it?
take it.
Go to it.
Thank you for that question. You know, one of the things I've really tried to get across is that we're different. We come from different places. We've had different life experiences. We might worship in different ways. We work different positions. But we're all what's special about the United States. We're on the United States team. And our Constitution, the fact that we're a nation of laws, it is clear that America is the place where we're that place where, you know, we bring you're tired, you're weary, here in America, and you should have a fair shot to live the American dream. And when I talked about everybody counts, but everybody's accountable, when we see that not happening, when we see our neighbor being treated differently or unfairly or ostracized, then we all have a responsibility to step up and speak up, right? And always think about, are we living up to America's principles and ideas, and are we willing to defend them, not just for ourselves, but for our neighbor? And we have to hold the people that we elect accountable. If they're not representing you, regardless of the party. You know, I used to say to people when I served in the House, call the Republican senator too. Because we all are responsible for making sure that we're living up to the principles and ideas and serving the people that we represent. So we have to hold elected officials accountable, but also hold ourselves accountable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm happy to go next. Something that President Clinton says that always resonates with me is that our common humanity is more important than our interesting differences. And, you know, I think of that often, and I think about how our elected officials and the leaders of our country need to model that with our public discourse. I feel like these days people are looking at things, and our leaders present false choices. They're looking at things through this very political lens versus looking at it through the human lens, looking at politics over policy. And as you mentioned, there are certain fundamental policies and rights that we all have as human beings that should be guaranteed, that are guaranteed in our Constitution. So I feel like our leaders need to embody that more. There are all kinds of, we should be arguing over policy. We should not be arguing over humanity. And having that kind of respectful dialogue, trying to understand someone else's story, trying to connect. I think what that ad just showed us is that everybody wants to connect. Everybody wants to be seen and heard. So I think we have to start there. We have to start with that mutual respect and being curious, right? Ask questions, and that, again, needs to start at the top.
I know you want to move on to the next one, but I'll just say, at the end of the day, it shouldn't matter whether you're religious or an atheist, black or white, right, male or female, gay or straight, young or old, balding, bearded like me, punchy. Anyway, I'll stop describing myself. What should matter is the person inside. And what I think is incumbent upon all of us is a willingness to get to know each other.
Right.
The more we get to know each other, we may still disagree, and that's okay. That's healthy, in fact. But at least show respect to the other person. At least be kind to the other person, because I think, don't you want that in return? And that's, I think, what we need to remember.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Our next question will come from Nathan Johnson from the Tocqueville Fellows.
Hi, Nathan.
This question is for any speaker to answer. In the context of a particularly polarizing season of politics, artificial intelligence and algorithm-powered social media are frequently cited for their divisive and misleading effects on campaigns and elections. Do you believe, particularly in the context of election and campaign coverage, there are ways to repurpose the tools of AI and media algorithms positively that may open conversation and preserve truth?
Val, that's for you.
Is that for me?
Yeah,
That's for
sure.
you.
Yes.
Well, I sure wish AI was here to answer that question.
Yeah,
Yes,
well,
exactly.
I got to go to my
ChatGPT,
phone
you know,
for that
yes,
one. I don't
yeah.
know. Hold on.
I think I would start with the yes.
Next question.
Yes.
That is a great
You know, I
question.
talked a little bit about misinformation. And you know, AI, and we think about the internet, right? We're all on it. We all are exposed to it. But if we knew 40 years ago what we now know, would we have handled it differently? AI, it can be the best thing that has happened to us, but when it's used in the wrong ways, it can be the worst thing. And so whenever we are exposed to, we have to do our research.
Right.
And whenever we are exposed to misinformation or questionable information, we cannot settle for getting our news from one news source. You know, when we talk about the division within America, when we get our news from one news source, that's part of the problem. So we have got to, because look, the same things we heard in the 2016 campaign as it pertained to misinformation and interference from foreign entities and the improper use of AI, we're hearing them in the 2024 campaign. And it is incumbent upon us to, number one, make sure that we're getting the entire story, all of the information, so we can make informed decisions, because it's so important right now. But then Congress also, and you know, they've had to come to the table and start dealing with the rollout, if you will, of artificial intelligence. So we can take this tool that can be used in a wonderful way, like in the medical field, to share information and make it more expedient, that we can also control how it's used negatively in our elections. So we have got to broaden our resources, right? Because we do want to be good citizens. We want all the information. We want to vote for people who are going to uplift our agendas, see us and hear us. And so it's incumbent upon us, but also incumbent upon our elected officials to do the work that they need to do to put the safeguards in place that will help protect you and others.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great question.
Can I just say very quickly, technological advances are happening faster and faster. It is hard to keep up with them. I certainly can't keep up with them. And they can be used for good.
That's right.
Except for those who want to use them for bad. And so this was viewed as a great technological innovation. And for the most part, it is. It has connected a lot of people who otherwise would not be connected. But it also can be a terrible device if you rely on it solely to get your news and information. And so you have to use technology carefully, wisely, and be on the lookout for those who are looking to use it for nefarious purposes. Because unfortunately, there are enough of those people out there trying to pollute and corrupt plenty of minds.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great question.
Next, we'll hear from Jacob Taylor, Furman University College Democrats.
Hi, Jason.
And this question is for any speaker to answer, and that is, what specific strategies or initiatives have you or your organizations found most effective in fostering cross-partisan dialogue and empathy among younger generations? Additionally, how can these approaches be scaled or adapted to influence the broader political and policy discussions? And what metrics or indicators do you use to assess their success?
Should I answer this one, David, too? I mean, I just want
You're on a roll.
Can I take part of it, though?
Yeah.
You know, let me remind the wonderful students who are here, because we're here because of you.
Absolutely.
America has never had one major movement that you were not a part of. Your generation was not a part of. All of the wonderful, successes that we celebrate, all of those voting rights, civil rights, the rights for women to vote, rights of equality, young people led those movements, right? And so so understand that and realize that if we're going to have a chance or any opportunity to bring us back together on one accord, you're going to help lead that effort. I just finished up a fellowship at Georgetown University, and I left so encouraged and inspired. I thought I was there to inspire, but I left so encouraged and inspired because what I realized is that young people, your generation, want to help solve problems. You want to help make a difference. And you're disappointed in, say, my generation when we see the problems with immigration, the problems with healthcare, the problems with the cost of education, the problems with affordable housing, and it doesn't appear that we are doing anything about those things. So bringing you to the table, asking you questions, not telling you, well, this is our plan and this is how we're going to do it, and but getting your input. And any plan that's developed to move America forward, you have to be a part of that plan. I did it at Georgetown. I did it when I was in Congress. I did it when I was at the police department, not just for the moment, but looking down the road. See, that's what made America great. What makes America great is not just solving problems today, but solving problems in a way that will carry us 50 years into the future. You've got to be a part of that. David?
Or Stephanie.
I'll
check
take it.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I got to collect my thoughts now. I don't know what the hell to say.
I think we need to get back to the basics. Listening to you talk about your parents and your home, modeling voting and what a privilege it was, and it was a responsibility. I feel like we need to get back to the basics and show our young people, starting in the very earliest elementary school, grade school, having them understand civic and what does it mean to be civically engaged. Not just telling them, right? Showing them, giving them tools on how they can be civically engaged as a young person. How can they make change in the communities? Why is it important for you to use your voice? Why does your opinion matter? All of this ladders up. And I feel like we need to get back to the basics, starting with our young people. We also want this to be sort of grassroots up. People, I feel like young people especially, they want the tools. They don't want to be told, oh, you should go join a club, you should vote, you should do this. We need to explain and model and give them tools to do that. It can be very confusing for a college student to request an absentee ballot or to understand, the different rules in different counties and different, states. So we need to do a better job, instead of telling people what to do, showing them what to do and to break it down. The last thing I'm going to say is about TikTok and AI, and it can be used for a lot of negative, but I've been encouraged and interested in what I've seen TikTok do recently in sort of young people using TikTok to explain things. They get on TikTok and make videos and break things down, like a how to do this, how to vote, how to get engaged. They're showing you step by step by step. We aren't in a generation, we need to do a better job of giving people tools and explaining how, because I think young people want to be engaged and involved. We need to give them those tools and show them how to do it.
Our work at the Bush Institute is grounded in 4 principles that guided President and Mrs. Bush when they were in Washington and since they returned to Dallas: freedom, opportunity, accountability, and compassion. And as part of that work, we have a pillar we call strengthening our democracy. And within that, we have launched a series of listening tours that are designed to bring together almost like a focus group to talk about these sensitive issues. I think one of the things we're lacking as a nation are the opportunities to sit down and interact with each other. And I think our foundations and the BPC's work and others bring those opportunities to people. Ask them, what do they think about the state of U.S. democracy? What inspires them? What worries them? What do they think about the role of the media? In the surveys that are conducted before we have these sessions, we have quite different numbers than the ones you showed up there, President Davis, where people said, I'm not sure I want to have these conversations with people with whom I disagree strongly. After these sessions, they say, I'm really glad I did that.
Right.
And so I think finding opportunities to have, there's a series Emmanuel Acho does that are called Uncomfortable Conversations with and then fill in the blank. In his case, a black man or a Jewish person or whatever the case may be. And we sometimes just need to have these uncomfortable conversations, but do them in a respectful and civil manner. That's the key, and that's how we approach these sessions. We've done them with SMU students. We're on the campus of SMU, and also with veterans and others. We just did one Monday, actually on the Hill, with the Problem Solvers Caucus, staff from the Problem Solvers Caucus. And giving people an opportunity to talk about these things, I think, is really important.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And our next question will be Anna Hicks from the Riley Advance Team.
Stephanie, this one's for you.
Oh, Grace.
Actually, Mr. Kramer, this is for you.
Oh, it's for you. Hello. Mic drop.
My phone's ringing, I'm sorry.
President Bush endorsed presidential candidates in the 2008 and 2012 elections, but noticeably abstained from endorsing anyone in 2016 or 2020, and says that he will not endorse a presidential candidate in 2024. Could you provide more context for President Bush's decision to remain silent on this matter? Additionally, how is the George W. Bush Institute and Presidential Center engaging in this year's election?
It won't surprise you that you're not the first person to ask me this question. President Bush's office, he has a separate office that handles these kinds of matters for him, but his office was quoted recently saying he is retired from presidential politics. And his belief is that the institute that I run should focus on policy and not on politics. He has views. He feels that those are his own personal views. And he recognizes that there are some people who want him to speak out. There are other people who think he shouldn't. So this is his own personal decision. And at the Institute, we focus on civility. We focus on trying to develop leaders. We do this together with the Clinton Foundation, as well as the Bush 41 and LBJ Foundation and Presidential Leadership Scholars that we're very proud to work on together. We do this by tackling mis and disinformation. And so the work we do is much more policy focused. There are a lot of people out there speaking about the elections and politics, and President Bush has chosen not to be one of those.
Thank you.
All right. Now we'll hear from Liv Fletcher, Furman Pride Alliance.
This question is for any speaker to answer. How can marginalized communities such as the LGBTQ+ community effectively communicate and collaborate with those who have previously invalidated their identities and concerns?
I'll start there.
Sure.
Again, I think it's really focusing on our common humanity and sharing stories. I think when people come in contact, or a family member or a close friend, when they understand and experience or see how trans people, how people who are othered, how unfair they are being treated. And when you know someone and you see that, you try to put yourself in that position, right? As a parent, I think about a trans child and how traumatizing it must be from that young age to be confused about your identity. And how could you not have compassion and love and understanding for that? And how could you not want to do everything you could to make that child's life better and that teenager's life better? So I think that hearing more stories and hearing directly from people who are affected by these policies in Arkansas, it is very depressing right now to see how our trans brothers and sisters are being treated right now. But allies, people like me, we have to stand in solidarity and support, and we have to be part of sharing those stories of impact. Because I feel like, as you said earlier, when you hear, it's hard to hate someone. It's hard to, when you may have a human connection. So I think humanizing and having those connections and sharing stories, and for those of us that are scared or fearful because we don't understand, it's okay to be scared or fearful, but be curious. Be curious about the circumstances, why people, want to understand more about people's stories. And I feel like once we kind of put that out there and we are willing to look at our common humanity, then I think, we can make progress in that. And I will always stand with the trans community, with LGBTQ, and I hope people will take a step back and be reflective.
And if I could add, look, through all that we're dealing with right now, through all of the challenges, I am still encouraged. And as I said in my remarks, I believe in the promise of America because I've seen the promise of America. We have many stories in our history where different groups of people were discriminated against. But somehow, through good people who believed in our country and who we say we are, were willing to step up, ordinary people who did extraordinary things, we were able to pass legislation to protect groups of individuals who were different. This is not something we've never seen before. We've seen it before, but every person has an obligation, regardless of who you are, to care about discrimination of any kind. What's the saying? We are not free until every person is free. And if we don't work to make sure that every person is free, then sooner or later, it's going to come back around to us. Here we are again, dealing with women's rights, for example, 52 years ago. So remember, we are still that nation trying to form a more perfect union. We were warned that we are a work in progress. And we have some of the greatest challenges, but we also provide the greatest hope to deal with those challenges. And we all have to do that. Because when I see you, I see me. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Can I just add, I'm a member of that community. Sorry. Until a couple of years ago, I couldn't wear this ring. So there has been tremendous progress. Sorry, I'm not sure what. Emotional. We made a lot of progress, but it's not a linear path. There are going to be ups and downs, as there have been in the civil rights movement. There have been an equal treatment of women.
Yes.
It requires constant, steady work. And I do believe, I totally agree with Val and Stephanie. Everyone should be comfortable with who they are. They should be treated with respect that they deserve. It doesn't matter whom you love. It doesn't matter whatever you call yourself. Just be a good person. Judge somebody based on the character of the quality of the character rather than what you think that person might be. I apologize for that.
Everybody has a story. That's right.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm motivated. Yes.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
Thank you, David.
I am mindful of the time, but we've got 2 more student questions, and I'm going to let them ask them. So
I promise
just
not to
be
cry.
patient. Be patient. It's a good conversation.
Ask David.
Oh, I'm done.
Clay Wallace, the Paladin newspaper. They would fire me as their advisor if I didn't let him ask the question.
So this question is for any speaker to answer. Nearly 75% of Americans believe that news media is contributing to political polarization in the United States, according to a survey conducted last year by the Associated Press, Newark Center for Public Affairs Research. In light of this, how can Americans address and overcome divisions sown by media networks that use polarization as a business strategy?
I'll answer it quickly. Don't watch them.
Yeah. Hit them where it hurts.
Yeah.
In the pocketbook. I mean, that's it.
I think someone said this earlier, diversify where you get your news.
That's right.
You know what? I, every day, or try to turn on, CNN, Fox News. I try to read The Guardian. I try to read all different news so I can try to discern for myself instead of relying on what I'm seeing on social media or in one news source, right? You have to be able to look. I read the Wall Street Journal and I read the Washington Post, because then I can look at two viewpoints and try to discern for myself, what I think is really happening. And I would encourage people to do that. Don't get stuck in your echo chamber. It may make you feel good for a few minutes, but that's not news.
It's entertainment.
Yeah.
That hurts.
And it's not really entertaining anymore. I think we're all tired of it. Right. The exhausted majority.
We're exhausted.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and our final question will come from Bryant Garrison from the Furman Conservative Society.
Hi, Brian.
It's for Representative Demings. How did your previous career experiences as a police officer, police chief, and leader in your local community influence your perspectives, wider policy positions, and ability to find common ground with colleagues from across the aisle in Congress and in the Bipartisan Policy Center? There we go.
I think I love you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that question. Look, as a law enforcement officer, as I said in my remarks, when I was appointed chief, crime was at an all-time high in Orlando. And remember, I was the first woman to serve in the position, so crime's at an all-time high. So we were laser focused on the mission, and that was to reduce crime. And we had a very diverse police department and a very diverse community. But we used every resource. We made sure that the mission was clear in the community, that everybody counts, but everybody's accountable. We clearly communicated expectations to the officers. I really could not tell you the political party of the overwhelming majority of the men and women I worked with. But when we put on the uniform and went 10-8 in service, we were laser focused on one mission. And so that guided my attitude and approach in Congress. One of the first things I did after getting there was to establish relationships. Relationships matter. It is difficult to hate up close. And I joined this prayer group, this Thursday morning prayer group, that consisted of Republican men. The majority were Republican men. And I walked in there, and what it gave me was, I wanted to participate in a prayer group, but it gave me the opportunity to get to know them, and to get to know their spouses, and to get to know about their children, and to get to know what kept them up at night, and to hear about family illnesses or deaths and all of that. It humanized the individual. And I can tell you, because I was there, it is impossible to get the big stuff done. And I think y'all want us to get the big stuff done. Right. Without reaching across the aisle and establishing those relationships. So look, when I had legislation that I wanted to get passed, I went to those men in the prayer group. And my responses, for the most part, the responses were favorable, because they knew me, and we had broken down the walls of she's a Democrat and we're Republicans. And we had to find ways. We had to just push through, because I started questioning whether Congress was deliberately keeping us apart. Like you talked about earlier, that you used to eat together and children went to school together and hang out together. There is no time in Congress now to do that. We start about 9 o'clock in the morning and go till late at night. We go to our condos and apartments and back at it the next day. There's no time to socialize, because when you get to know the individual and build those relationships, it creates an environment for you to work together on the big stuff. Don't be threatened by when someone disagrees with you. You want to reach your full potential, go talk to some people who don't agree with you. Because that's the only hope to save this nation where the torch has been passed on to us. It's in our hands now. All of the things we celebrate about this nation, protecting them, is now in our hands, and we've got to do it together. Building relationships is the most powerful tool if we want to solve some of America's biggest problems. And so I believe that we can do this through November 5th and beyond, if we remember who we are, that we were created for a greatness, that the world looks up to us as a nation. Our friends, our allies around the world, and our enemies are watching to see what we are doing. I served on a panel last night in Canada with Speaker Kevin McCarthy. And someone asked the question about why the wars now? You know, why did Russia invade Ukraine now? Why the attack on Israel that has spilled over into Gaza now? What's going on? Well, there are a lot of factors, and we don't have time to go into everything. But the bottom line is, I believe when the world looks at the division in America, when they see America fighting once again against ourselves, does that create an opportunity for the most powerful, most effective nation with the biggest, most strongest economy and the strongest military, when we're busy fighting ourselves? Does that give our enemies an opportunity in the world? And so we got to get our act together, and I believe that we can if we really remember how great we are. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Those are great questions.
Yeah. I want to thank our student leaders. Those were
Thank
fantastic
you.
questions.
Good job.
And now I would like to turn things over to the Riley Institute's founding director, Dr. Don Gordon, to close us out this evening.
And folks, I want to first thank Danielle, because this series, she has done an incredible job as a facilitator all the way through. Danielle, thank you. And Val Demings, Stephanie, David, it's an honor to have you here. It truly is, and you make me happy. So I spent I did a leave of absence from Furman, ran a congressional office for 2 years in the early 1980s. And I will tell you that conversations that David and Stephanie have had earlier today about how different it is. In the Longworth House office building in the basement, there's a cafeteria. In the 1980s, we all ate together. I ran a congressional office from one party, and my best friend, oddly enough, was from another party. And we ate together. Everybody, Longworth House office building was just filled of laughter and people from different parties eating with each other at different tables. We played on integrated Republican, Democrat softball teams, basketball teams. And afterwards, we go down to Chadwick's in Old Town, and whoever lost paid for the good stuff. It was a wonderful place. And 3 years ago, I ate down in that cafeteria, and it was the quietest place you've ever seen. Nobody spoke to each other. The Republicans went all the way over here, and the Democrats went way over here. And yet you guys make me hopeful, because what the Clinton Institute, what the Bush Institute, the Clinton Foundation, and what the Bipartisan Institute are doing are exactly what we need to lead us through. It is. And I appreciate you so much, and you give me hope. You really do. Now for my prepared remarks. 25 years ago, I had the great honor of establishing Furman University's Riley Institute. Named for my great friend, Dick Riley, and Betty, happy birthday. One more. Secretary Riley inspires the staff and the leadership of the Riley Institute to remain true to its founding beliefs, that building an informed leadership body, supporting high-quality public education, and maximizing contributions of diverse people are key levers for progress in our state and for our country, and that a commitment to collaboration and cross-partisanship is absolutely essential to success. I really hope that tonight's program, the whole series, whole Straight Talk series, has given you a glimpse into the depth of this Institute's great work. For the past 25 years, the Richard W. Riley Institute at Furman has been a leader on this campus, in Greenville, across the state, and increasingly across the country, elevating informed, evidence-based approaches to critical and complex public issues. But we really have not done this work alone. Secretary Riley, you've often said, and I can't do your accent, but it said, Don, I've not done anything by myself. I've had a great village. And that statement rings true. Our mission in the Riley Institute is grounded in our village, a network of partners and friends, and folks, that really includes you too. I encourage each of you to learn how you can support the next 25 years of the Riley Institute by visiting our 25th anniversary webpage, which you can find at the QR code on the screen above me. Thank you again to our wonderful speakers for sharing your great wisdom. Thank you all you for being with us tonight and all the other nights. And more importantly, thank you for being part of our village. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.